On the 3rd of February 1960, British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan would deliver his famous Winds of Change speech to the Parliament of South Africa. See, from 1945 to 1951, the Labour Party, which was in charge of Britain during this period, had started a process of decolonisation, but the policy had been halted, or at least slowed down, by the Conservative governments from 1951. This speech in 1960 would go on to signal that the Conservative Party, which formed the British government at this point and to which Macmillan himself belonged to, would no longer impede independence for many of these territories. What does this have to do with the rest of the video? Well, not much, which is why I'm collaborating with Paradox Interactive to bring you today a complete guide for the Mughal Empire, since for decolonisation to work, you kind of need colonies in the first place, and why choose where to colonise when the whole world can be yours? Now, while playing around on this patch, I kind of ended up with stupid hours of footage of me at speed 3 try-hard microing battles, and expansion making sure I do everything super optimally. It was fun for me, but this has two issues. I don't think it's very fun for you, and it also makes for, well, a bad guide, because following it step for step would be incredibly boring and tedious, as well as also incredibly impossible past like 1445. Timing-wise, if you aren't as lucky or unlucky as me on siege rolls, AI positions, etc., you're going to have a different result. If you rolled a different general to me, the AI might take a battle it avoided with me, for example. All of this combined means that a guide that's not very useful is going to be created from this footage. So instead of subjecting you to 15 hours of me playing speed 3 and pausing for half the time, instead I'm going to be giving you some general advice, as well as some pitfalls to avoid in your own campaigns. It also means that if you think of yourself as a higher skilled player, I can point you in the direction of some other things you can do to squeeze out more optimal and more fun things. And if you're not too confident in doing those things yourself, you can just not do the extra things and just take your time in this run. That's the thing with the Mughals, is they're quite powerful, especially with this new patch, meaning that even if you mess up, well, there's still plenty of time for the leeway. Now, before we go into the classic suggestion, that is Timurids into Mughals, I'd just like to address for those people that will be attempting true Era of Timmy runs, so playing as Afghanistan or Transox or Khorasan Farzistan for the extra masochistic among you, the missions for these tags have not changed. They are the same default missions. Well, I say default, they're not the default missions, but those are the missions that you picked up from the India DLC all those years back. These are still the same, and while not honestly good or fancy, they're not inherently too weak. You can get some morale of armies for a bit, you can stabilize Afghanistan, get some claims, go into India, get a general and some morale of armies for 25 years. You can really tell it's one of the old Paradox missions with how little the flavor and content you're getting out of these ones are. But they're still there, so no worries about that. However, the star of the show is, of course, the Timurids and the Mughals. So let's take a look at them now. The Timurids are no longer a one-trick pony that kind of sits there and has to form the Mughals or just fade into irrelevancy. They actually have a decent path of their own. Now, this path I'm not going to be covering. I'll be letting Laith from social streamers deal with that. I'll be focusing on playing the Timurids with the express intention of forming the Mughals. With that said, I think this is a good place to actually begin our guide and start talking about some of the setup that we should be partaking in when going ahead for this. Now, you do start with two privileges that are somewhat debuff, but are more dynamic. I guess it's best way to view them as a debuff, but you kind of want to get rid from your ulema and emirs. And these two privileges are going to be the supremacy of the Yasa, which is going to decrease religious unity and tolerance of the true faith, at the cost of, well, giving you some cav combat ability. So when you do get rid of it, your cav's going to be 5% less combat ability, so it's not the major debuff, but it is what it is. And it's still something you definitely want to do and get rid of. The other one, of course, is the Soyurgal grants. This one's a bit less crippling in the early game, but still something you don't want to have. Decreases your tax and reform progress growth while you have it up, but it also makes your army tradition decay a bit less. Overall, again, these aren't exactly crippling or anything inherently damaging. It's just something to be aware of. These are things that you want to be aiming to get rid of in your run. And the reason I bring this up is because they got rid of 3 decision. More specifically, you want to reform the treasury, which requires having all your subjects have less than 35 liberty desire, and then either deving 10 times and seizing land 4 times, or having 40% of your land owned by your crown. Since I would suggest a more aggressive route where you're selling off your crown land, I would say aim for the second thing, and since you'll be deving the Renaissance anyway, you're going to get those 10 dev clicks without issue. The supremacy of the Sharia is a bit more difficult to achieve, I find. You need to get 3 agendas from the Ulema completed, or have 5 tolerance to the true faith, well, as well as have 5 tolerance to the true faith, or get level 3 government reforms. You're going to go for the tolerance to the true faith, I'm just going to tell you that outright, and build 3 temples. The 3 temples are by far the easiest part of that requirement. Now, the reason I bring this up, and I think this is going to be a bit of a random quick thing, that tidbit for you, is you do have the mission Rightful Protector. This is not exactly difficult to complete. Just get one of the estate agendas completed from the Emirs, Merchant Guilds, or whatever, get to 1 stab, and be hiring 3 advisors. This is going to significantly change those decisions in the sense that for the first option, you're not going to need to complete the 3 ulema privileges, and for the second option, you're not going to need to have your subjects loyal. Here is going to be my first optional suggestions for you. The national manpower 20% and liberty design subjects is nice to have. However, it's not that big of a deal. What I would genuinely recommend is to go for the top option that will give you legitimacy, the tolerance to the true faith, and make revoking the, well, supremacy of the Yasa privilege significantly easier. When you are just sitting around here, and I've tested this 6 times, so it'd be really fun if it doesn't work on the 7th time and you summon a diet. The ulema, let me guess, yep, they would like to ask you to dev 3 dev provinces. The issue is, as the Timurids, you actually have a decent chunk of random 3-4 dev deserts, so they're going to more likely than not, and this is now my 7th test of this, initially just ask you to dev a desert. Not only is this going to be not helpful for your nation, it's also going to set you back like 150 admin a pop. So completing 3 of these dev desert requirements, you're going to be paying 450 admin, or basically an entire idea's worth of admin, just for some desert development. With that said, let's now discuss what I would recommend as your initial setup. Now, I've done quite a few test runs of this, but I'll also be explaining all of my reasoning and thinking for the actions that I'm taking, so you'll know why you're doing this as well as just what you're meant to do. I won't be unpausing, but I'll just talk you through what you should be aiming for and what to go for. So as you can see, here's a little prelude. If you want to read it, go have fun. Personally, I am not. And let's immediately start addressing the big things. Subjects, we're going to have disloyalty issues the moment that Shah Rukh is going to die. Another fun thing I've noticed when Shah Rukh dies is pretty much everyone around you is going to spawn pretender rebels. Afghanistan, Sistan, Fars, Khorasan, Transox, all these people are going to start getting pretender rebels, which is kind of bad if you're the one currently invading them, because this also applies to countries like QQ, for example, as well. They're going to get pretenders. But what this does mean is that if your subjects, and they do like doing this, delete their armies, you should actually let them break to those pretenders, as this will give them their pretenders' armies as their new troops. So when you annex them, you're able to keep those armies. It's also just something to be aware of, that when you do die, you're going to have a massive rebel wave, and it's quite a noticeable one happen right away. But you're probably a bit more concerned about losing your both -5 liberty desire from benevolence, as well as your -50% Empire of Shah Rukh penalty. Well, you'd be glad to hear that one of the things that Paradox has actually done in this update is severely decrease the RNG necessary for this. As you can see, you have a truce until December of 1446, so 2 years and a month, give or take, with all of your subjects. What this means is that even if Shah Rukh dies before December 1446, they still can't declare war and start doing independency things against you. So you've kind of offset the Shah Rukh death until 1446. This is quite a good thing, because I've genuinely had a save where Shah Rukh died, for me, at the end of November. And there's even one posted to the Reddit where Shah Rukh died on the 12th of November, meaning he lasted 1 whole day into the campaign. Obviously, that's really bad and just warrants a restart, but it's not a luxury you can afford in multiplayer. Although again, in multiplayer, you're probably not going to be conquering the world as well. Anyway, that's a side step. It's just more important context to be known. Let's now start by doing our estates. Now, you're going to be doing a lot of expansion very aggressively, and what that means is that you're going to be getting a lot of crown land. For those unaware, crown land tends towards 30 when you have no absolutism. So if you're below 30 crown land and you conquer land, you will gain crown land, and if you're above 50% crown land and you conquer land, you lose crown land. When absolutism gets enabled, we start doing some fancy math things where the influence of your estates gets affected by the absolutism of your country, and then that starts to affect basically your equilibrium on the estate crown land. Completely unrelated for us and completely unnecessary for this guy, so you can ignore that. Just know that before absolutism matters, your crown land is going to tend to 30. What that means is that the optimal way of playing is actually having the crown land as low as possible, because you're going to gain the most amount of it while expanding. Now, if you're a bit worried about giving out all the monarch points as I am, don't. I'm going to demonstrate to you how you can give out all your monarch points, so get rid of 30 crown land and still have all of your subjects loyal with this setup here. So for the Ulema, we need to go ahead and give them the religious state. Then we want to go down, and we want to go down to clerical ministers. Eventually, I would suggest actually go and flip this into freedom of interpretation, or even get rid of it entirely for the max absolutism debuff, because you want to be going down into mysticism for the missionary strength. But just pick one, whichever one you prefer. I'm going to be going for legalism early on because of the tech cost reduction, and I'm kind of going to need the money from the national tax as well as the manpower from the national manpower modifier. So those are my choices. With that said, after clerical ministers do pick up oversight of the Ulema, you're going to struggle with Ulema loyalty without it. This is because of the debuff from the supremacy of the Yasa. Then go ahead and grab Enforce Unity of Faith. Not only is this going to increase the tolerance of true faith by 1, which is good for revoking the supremacy of the Yasa, but it's also going to give you a much needed missionary strength point. Now, this is going to leave you on 5 out of 6. The last thing we need is very important, and make sure you grab it, and that is, of course, going to be religious diplomats. Not only does this provide you with +1 dip reputation, this is also going to make all of your subjects have +10 opinion of you, which is going to slightly help with their liberty desire, as they're going to have a higher opinion of you. With the Ulema complete, we move to the Emirs. We're going to give them primacy of the Emirs for another monthly mill point. I like my monarch points. And then we need to go ahead and give them right of council, as well as supremacy over the crown. With that said, we then need to go ahead and give them strong duchies, as it's going to decrease liberty desire in our subjects by 10% and give us 2 dip relations to play with. Don't worry, we'll be taking more subjects soon. Now, at the moment, we now have a divergence of path. I would recommend not taking it right now, but leaving a slot open to take a mirror integration policy, as this is going to decrease the dip annexation cost by 5%, but that doesn't really matter since you have cause on your subjects, but most crucially, it's going to disable the reputation penalty, as well as the opinion penalty from annexing your subjects. This is going to be quite useful for you, because it's going to let you basically annex all your subjects, the ones you have cause on anyway, in very rapid succession. What I find is that if I have, for example, the Timurids here, and I annex Afghanistan, Khorasan, and Transox, this is going to decrease the opinion of Fars by me by 90, because I've just annexed 3 subjects. So without that policy, it just takes a while to re-annex Fars and everyone else in that regard. So it's just something to bear in mind. If, however, you are not too fussed about annexing your subjects literally the moment you can, in 1454, what I would actually recommend, and this is really good for you to take, and certainly something to very much consider, is right at the bottom, you can go ahead and give Emir officer rights. This is going to enable you to get an extra general for 50 tradition, and that's going to be very helpful with the fighting you're going to be doing, because you don't want to be spending your mill points on a general this early on. You want to get to Miltech 4 as fast as humanly possible. I'm not going to be doing this right now myself, because I'll be going for the aggressive route where I assume that I'll be giving out nobility Emir integration policy later. However, it's just something to bear in mind. If you're not planning on giving that one out, definitely take the Emir officer rights right now. Now, finally, for the merchant guilds, go ahead and take the land of commerce, followed by, of course, in debt to the merchant guilds to get your early economy going. Then grab free enterprise as you want both loyalty and influence. And finally, right at the end, with 4 out of 5 privileges, you want to go ahead and take merchant guild financial demands, giving you 10% more taxes. This is also going to put your merchants above 60 influence, meaning that you're going to be getting 20 trade efficiency out of them. And since their loyalty equilibrium is going to get to 60, this is going to be quite helpful, as this is going to help you both to dev the Renaissance and just have lower burgers. It's good. Dev cost is good, and I rate it. Now, for the Dibby, I'm not going to give out anything. I'm going to, from now, admit that I'll be planning this route with the intention of doing a 1 phase as well. It's completely doable. So for the Dibby, nothing there is really useful, because it just helps provinces I'm going to be converting. It also does kind of give you a freebie out, where if you ever do have an estate privilege, you just can't complete any of them. Usually the Dimi asks for 2 or 3 privileges given out to them, so you can just do that one, as that one tends to be pretty open and quite doable. Anyway, after you've done that, all you want to go ahead and do is summon the diet. Now, if you're not doing the Ulema route revoke, then, well, if you're doing that way, then take the Ulema one. There you go. Another Dev the Desert. Let me guess, is this one desert? Oh, it's a dryland, sorry. Fair enough, let's make that a 1 out of 8 where they ask you to dev a dryland instead of a desert. But that's going to save you around 50 monarch points on this cycle, but the other options are usually, yeah, Dimi sometimes does also like you to ask you to develop deserts or mountains. Yep. Let's take the 50 admin instead. Right, but with that said, you can now go ahead and seize land. This is going to put you up to 5% crown land, and most crucially knock you down to just plus 100% liberty desire from subject developments. As you can see, they're not happy, and Sharu hasn't even died yet. But don't worry, we'll be fixing that sooner rather than later. And our military tab, we'll ignore that for now. Although I will say this is a good time as any just to rule your heir and see what he is up. 1 siege, 3 shock, can't complain. You do want your generals, and I think it's better to be aggressive and have these generals, especially if they have siege pips on them, than not have them. It also helps with AI decisions to avoid fights. If you just look intimidating enough while you siege, the AI just will not take the fight and let you win the war that way. Anyway, in terms of the religious tab, we'll get to that in a bit. Go ahead to your decisions, go ahead and adopt the title of Khalifa, denounce sect practices and force religious unity. In this case, we're going for the Mughals, so we don't need to be worrying about reforming the Great Yuan or restoring the Mongol Empire. Now, Unify Islam is going to be an option for you, and it's one I'm going to suggest. Missions will be returning shortly as well. Nothing too fancy to say about tech and ideas. And now let's address trade. At the moment, you're actually going to be making more money by having your starting merchants collect in Hormuz, which is currently what he's doing, and then having your 2 peeps steer from Lahore and Samarkand. Because these are inland nodes, that's where you want to be continued to steer from, so that's so far so good. But I'm actually going to suggest you move your merchant from Hormuz into Persia. Now, Hormuz, because you're collecting a secondary node, you're not making that much money anyway, and by collecting in Persia, you'll be able to get more trade power in an inland node, which is quite important, as well as the buffs from collecting inside your main node. that also shouldn't be underrated. Now, this will actually slightly cut into your money, but I find that it's not that big of a deal initially, and furthermore, even when that does happen, you very quickly catch up. It's just later I forget to flip the merchants around. You're going to be doing a lot of trade things, don't worry about it, especially with India making a lot of money from you from trade, so there'll be more messed around with merchants eventually, but for now, this is the setup I would actually recommend you do. Now let's move on from trade, go on to our government tab, and what we're going to do is, of course, lenient taxation. This is going to give us a dip rep point, making our subjects more loyal, as well as decrease the liberty to design them by another 15%. There is an argument to be made for getting CCR and manpower, or even taking 15% tax and a bunch of money from your subjects, but I prefer this route and then giving out the monarch points. And that'll be the route I'll be suggesting. With that, get to your court, and you have some quite nice advisors preset for you. You can go ahead and grab a jammy for half price stab cost chap, and immediately I would suggest both focusing admin and promoting him. This is what those burger loans are for. Then, because you'll be burning a lot of admin, trust me, go ahead and grab your dip rep half price guy. No need to promote him. And for the mill ones, these ones aren't preordained. If you have a land force limit guy that's one cost, I'd actually suggest grabbing him right away. If not, grab something like discipline. Don't worry, you're not going to be keeping him around for long. Then, I would suggest you go to your mercenary companies and immediately hire the free company. Now, there's an argument to be made that you shouldn't be doing this, as this gets rid of your 5 army professionalism when you build it. But honestly, I'd rather have the 90k men with 20k manpower cap than even the little bit of manpower that I could get from that little bit of slackening here. Even if I were to wait around and slacken, I'd rather have these units out earlier. The free company is going to be pretty much the only merc stack you ever use until you form the Mughals and get their fancy new Gurkhas that they pick up from their mission tree. Slight spoilers. But I think it's definitely worth the 5% army professionalism just to get them out in the field. Now, I'm building them in this very specific province, and we're going to talk about why as we talk about our rivals. Now, we're pretty much guaranteed to get the Ottomans and Mamluks to rival us, and then we have these 4 options for our rivals. Now, the immediate no-brainer is to rival a Jam, as we'll be stabbing them immediately to get our cause back. No question about it. But the second question becomes Delhi, Mamluks, and the Ottomans. Well, there is an argument to be made for Delhi, as if you expand really aggressively early, which you will, you'll be able to overexpand them and overcome them, giving you some free power projection as well. My issue is that when you do rival Delhi, if they don't die to Sirhind, and they don't always die to Sirhind, they're going to start being annoying, because they're going to see you as a rival. They're going to start looking at countries like Baluchistan and Ladakh and Kashmir and those kinds of tags and go, these guys are threatened by the Timurids. I'm going to guarantee them and ally them and try and protect them. And this is just something you don't want to bother with. This is why Mamluks and Ottomans make much better rivals, because honestly, a lot of the time they don't have the capacity in dip relation slots for the Mamluks, and honestly, for me, willpower from the Ottomans to just bother actually getting in your way most of the time when they're your rivals. So that will be my suggestions. But with rivals said, we now need to address the elephant in the room. A Jam in every single one of my test games that I haven't done a very specific things, allies Nagai. I find it as a good thing for your initial war for a Jam to ally Nagai, as this enables you to march over there and punch Nagai for max money and war rep. The war rep is nice, but you also pick up 230 ducats from that initial war. However, if that's something you want to avoid and you'd rather just save yourself a lot of effort fighting and just give up on the 230 ducats, that's fine. In which case, I'd suggest not bothering to promote this half-price guy and keeping your money that way, because you're probably going slower as well, so you're not going to be that aggressive on monarch points. You're not going to be needing that extra 1 admin as much as I would be. However, if you want to prevent this Nagai Jam alliance, very simple, make sure you ally them yourself. You and a Jam are going to hate each other. So what that means is that Nagai is going to only ever ally one of you, and so the only way to really prevent a Jam grabbing Nagai is to grab them as an ally yourself. The next thing that I would also recommend with our newly found dip relation slots, and this is going to be kind of interesting, but it's definitely something I'd recommend, is go ahead and move out to Granada and guarantee their independence. What this is going to do is it's going to pretty much prevent, for the most part, unless you get pretty unlucky with Granada allying something like Clemenza, which not only slows down Castile, which is good for you, but it also means that Granada is ripe for the conquest when you get there. And you'll be going there very soon, as this will give you access to Alhambra, as well as the ability to press a decision, which you very much want to press, as you want to use Granada as a staging ground to get into Cordoba, so you can unify Islam. Now, slight spoilers, but we'll get to them sooner rather than later. This is my suggestions for the initial setup there. With that said, take this stack, split up 2 1k stacks from it. I would suggest moving your remaining 7k stack to Darab, and the other 1k stabs to these provinces here. These guys set to Atachev on both of them, and these guys have one of your 2 generals, so your either Sharu or whoever you rolled. Make sure if it's not going to be Sharu, you don't need a siege general on this guy as much as you want for Nagai. So I'd suggest if you don't have a siege pip on your heir, take him. And if your heir has 2 siege pips by some miracle, then put him onto the Nagai front. But wherever, just have a general here. You're going to be declaring for this province as your war goal. So what you want to do initially is walk on it, grab the war goal, get the ticking, and let your subjects, which you'll be setting to supportive, attach to you. Now, as you may have noticed with all the dip rep from our advisors, from the dip rep from the lenient taxation, and everything we've done, despite only having 5% crown land, our subjects are already down to 65 liberty desire everywhere. If you follow this exactly, you should also have 23 prestige at this point. Now, the thing is with prestige is that we're currently losing it to uncontested cause, but that's okay. That'll be going up. There's no real reason to be in positive prestige for us. We're not going to be struggling with AE, and we don't really need that morale of armies that much. So what I'm actually going to do is suggest you just placate twice. It's going to put you on negative prestige, but that's actually good because it's going to tick up now, especially when the uncontested cause goes away. And it's going to make Transox loyal. And lower Transox are going to build troops and go and fight for you. And as Transox fights for you, with these little 1k stags you're reinforcing, they're going to grow weak and use up their manpower instead of yours for all this fighting, which is very convenient. Finally, you should have one of your diplomats far away. I would suggest if you're doing the Nagai strategy, go ahead and immediately start building a spy nook on Nagai, the other diplomat. Keep one of them back to declare war on a jam on literally the earliest you can, there's 11th of December. If you want to be super greedy, you can go and get a month of improved relations with someone like Transox, but honestly, I won't bother. You're going to get them to 200 opinion nonetheless anyway. And that, for the most part, is all you need to do for the setup. You also will be able to convert this province right away, and there is a mission to get 5 provinces converted, so you want to kind of get that thing going. You will also pick up the Arsenal contribution decision. If you're building your temples, save yourself 5 ducats on each one with this button press. It's not that big of a deal though, so don't stress too much about missing this one. Anyway, that's kind of it for the initial setup. We have a bit of a war chest. We're losing a decent chunk of money, but don't worry about it too much. It's only going to get better the moment we get our jam cores back. For our first war with a jam, we should absolutely crush them, and we shouldn't struggle with that. And when we do 100% them, something interesting has been changed in this update. Because we have cores on, well, all of a jam, we can actually, for 100 war score, take literally everything. We don't get any money, but we full annex them. This means that we'll also get their 2 subjects, Luristan and Ardalan, for free. Now, Luristan is an excellent subject to grab for free because you have cores on this land. So, when the time is ripe for 1454, you can annex them for free as well. Ardalan, meanwhile, contains a couple cores on Karaka Yunlu, meaning that the moment you're done with the Ajam war, you can declare war on QQ and keep going. And because the reason for that is, of course, while you're waiting for Transox and Afghanistan to be annexable, so you can go through your missions to go ahead and, get to Delhi and form the Mughals, you may as well start getting yourself into, well, the Middle East and start going for the Ottomans and Mamluks to set up for the Unify Islam decision. So that'll be my suggestion. Again, the rate at which you go by depends on your skill level. Now let's finally talk missions. The Governors of Bay, you need to wait for Shahrukh to die, and at that point just keep people loyal. This shouldn't be an issue for you to complete. And when you do that, you're going to have an option for buffing, basically, the ICTA government reforms. Most of the time, when you are the Mughals, you're going to be spamming the land acquisition button for the core creation cost. Just a little spoiler, just ahead of time there. So buffing that might be an idea. The issue, of course, with that is the lenient taxation button. Buffing that immediately is just better, as it's going to give you 1 extra stab every time you press it, which is very nice. The efficient tax farming, in theory, seems okay. Making you gain double ducats is quite good for every 20 years, but you're not going to have that many subjects, and seizing 1% crown land every time for that interaction for what, some more tax, I don't think is worth it in the long run. If you really want 1% crown land, just double click 5 times. So those are my recommendations. You want to either go for option 2 or 3 on this one. And the other mission that I think is quite a bit important to talk about is actually going to be Fresh Blood. You need to win 15 battles. If you've been very optimal and avoiding battles and only ever, taking fights when you deserve it, you're actually probably going to be able to finish your Ajam Nagai war below 15 battles. In fact, in one of my test runs, I did this as the Timurids. I full annexed Ajam and pieced out Nagai for max money, and I managed to win 7 battles because I basically never went into the battles. If that is happening to you, find random AI 1k stacks, find random AI reinforcing like 2k subject stacks, and kill those. You just need to win battles. It doesn't matter if it's at 15k walking into a 1k, that still helps for the counter. Getting an army tradition of at least 40 is just going to happen by winning sieges. There shouldn't be any issue about that. That is one I've never struggled with. And this is going to be a good one because it's going to give you a monthly mill point, land maintenance reduction, and some extra manpower. You also want to make sure your emirs are loyal. They're going to add up quite quickly up to 70. They're already going up 0.34. And if you've given out this privilege here, I've tested it, for the emir's officer rights, and you press the decision for a general, this does make them lose 10 loyalty. They're going to be regaining 0.4 loyalty a month. They're going to get back to 60 really soon, so don't worry about it too much. But make sure you do go for it, because you've gone to, the moment you're done with the Ajam War, you won't need the Forceman advisor. You can replace him with a 60% off Sunni discipline guy, and that's just a nice thing to have. The Timurid Empire mission is going to be a bit harder for you to achieve. Getting 100k troops in the field is easier said than done, but 600 dev isn't the end of the world as well. When you do pick it up, you can get a Gurkhan Ghanid Empire until the Age of Discovery, giving you some siege ability and core creation cost. It's cool. Unfortunately, it's until the Age of Discovery, so it may as well be a very temporary button. My issue with it, of course, is I was thinking, if I just delay until the next age, maybe I can get 10% core creation cost for the entire next age, which would be a lot more useful. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. I checked the game code. This only applies to the Age of Discovery. If you pop this mission outside of the Age of Discovery, you get 100 of each monarch point. It also renames your country if you care about that. But don't worry, we'll rename it to the Caliphate anyway. Now, securing the East isn't that bad. Basically, just annex your subjects, go kill Baluchistan, and go into India. Nothing too much to talk about. These missions here are just annex Transox. Beat up Moghals. Honestly, I won't bother with these two. There's an argument to be made if you really want to go for the Mughal cavalry build to weaken Moghalistan, as this is going to give you the Chagatai warriors estate privilege to the emirs, and you're going to keep this estate privilege even if you form the Mughals, which contains a pretty useful 25% cav to infantry ratio and 5% cav combat ability. The early army tradition is nice, won't reject it at all. And the 5 army professionals, that doesn't hurt. So it depends. Is this a stopping point you want to make? If you can be bothered, go for it. If not, you're not really doing a cav Mughal build, then don't worry about it. The Recover the North mission is pretty similar, just go into Nagai as well. You can get some monthly war exhaustion and global prosperity growth from it. It's not that good. The global prosperity growth doesn't mean that you get 0.5 growth passively. That would be really strong. The way it works is that instead of gaining 1 prosperity tick every time you would gain prosperity, you gain 1.5 instead. The issue is that prosperity is one of those things where you either have it because you're not fighting or you're not. So it just means that you'll be able to get those provinces prospering a bit faster. But overall, I don't think it's that big of a deal. The nice thing is you do get a +3 shock general, which, by the way, becomes a +4 shock general, so it'd be at least a 4 shock general from this mission. And it also decreases the devastation of the provinces that you just took over. But honestly, I won't bother with these two missions if I were you. I'd only be doing them if I was actually playing the Timurids myself. As in, not planning to form the Mughals. I think just go focus on getting the Mughals. With that said, let's now talk about the Rumors of Rebellion mission. Go to war with the Ajam, and when you do the setup and you declare on the 11th of December, well, Ajam starts with 12k men, so the moment you declare war on them, they're not going to be putting any troops, so you want to pop this mission right away, as if you have more than double the size of the troops of Ajam, and even if you wait a couple of days, they're going to get a merc stack or something out as well. You're not going to be able to have double their troops, so you're not going to get 10 free power projection. Make sure you pop that, and the 75 mil points are great for getting Miltech 4 early. You should still be first to Miltech 4 because you're running an advisor, you're still getting 9 mil a month, and that 75 mil is quite helpful there. Getting Miltech 4 is absolutely massive for keeping your subjects loyal as well, as their relative army strength collapses relative to you the moment you have Miltech 4 and they don't. After that, go ahead and full annex the Ajam, as this gives you the 2 subjects. This is also going to give you the, in my opinion, slightly better reward of giving you 10 army tradition and making every Shia province lose 10 autonomy. Technically, subjugating them does make your liberty design subjects go down by 30 years, but I mean, at this point, the best way to get your liberty design subjects down by 20% is just owning the Ajam core, so you yourself are significantly stronger. The reason they have so much liberty desire is, compared to you, Transox, Afghanistan, Khorasan, Fars, and Sistan pretty much almost have more dev than you, and, well, a larger force limit. So, definitely a larger force limit. So, of course, relative to you, they're going to be very disloyal. However, by just annexing a Ajam, you very radically change that power dynamic. So you kind of get the secondary rewards for -20 liberty desire for free anyway. After that, I won't bother reconquering Mazandaran, stabilizing Khuzestan, because it's not, like, nice land to go into. You want to be going straight to beelining the Ottomans and going straight into the Mamluks. There's not much point going to Mashasha, a waste of admin in my opinion, and the mission rewards aren't really worth it that much in my opinion. However, for the Mazandaran provinces, well, you get some mission strength versus heretics for 30 years, and you increase your average monarch lifespan. It's not that great. For recovering Mazandaran, though, I would still recommend this state in particular is very, very nice in terms of its development. And so you want to grab it just to make yourself stronger. And it's very much inside the Persian node. You'll also, when you conquer it from this mission, set the center of trade to 2. If you can upgrade it with your own money, that's quite nice because you get extra production of it as well if you really want. And you can get a bit of money as well for your trouble. I'd recommend actually going for this mission and stabbing these people over here. They're not exactly going to be putting up much of a fight. And conquering is good for you because it's going to recover your crown land. At this point, you can technically keep going down here before you form the Mughals. I think it's a bit of a waste of time. The one thing that is important mentioning, though, is conquering Caucasus are going to be quite nice for you, as you'll be able to get up an extra missioning strength versus heathens until the end of the game, and the morale of armies doesn't hurt. You do keep this if you form the Mughals, but honestly, I don't think it's worth it. Especially since this mission requires you to own 14 provinces in this area, which is basically most of the provinces here. I mean, 14 provinces is what? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9... 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, you need to own 14 out of the 18 provinces on the chopping block. You basically need to actually fully conquer this area. I don't think it's worth it. Now, you may be wondering, why didn't the mission just say conquer the entire area? And don't worry, there is one mission in the Mughal tree later. Well, it's a mission that enables a decision, which requires you to own 80 provinces in a very specific state. Or sorry, it might be 60. It's either 60 or 80 provinces in a very specific area. But that entire area only contains 61 provinces. So Paradox is telling you they need to conquer this entire area, apart from one, to complete this mission. Which at this point, I'm just going to say, just beg the requirement, conquer the entire area. Anyway, we'll get to the Mughals soon enough. For the rest of the missions, Rifle Protector is nice. Go ahead and do your land tenure reform as well. It's going to give you 10 free dev. Going to give you some taxes. Definitely nothing to complain about. And Define the Yasa shouldn't be an issue once you've done that as well. Just convert 5 provinces and you can get some pretty nice buffs out of it as well, including a 67% off-dip rep advisor. These guys really love giving you cheap advisors. Finally, you can technically go for the Timurid Diwan. It's not that bad to do, especially getting to 20 states, as you'll be snaking a lot before you even form the Mughals. The other one thing to bear in mind, though, is you're going to need to grab an extra promoted culture, which is easier said than done. But if you can enable yourself the government reform for the Timurid Divan if you really want to play around with it. Honestly, I won't bother. So if you really want it, it's here. The other mission that I think is quite important to mention is going to be develop Herat. Don't do this until 1450 and the institution spawned. Then the moment it has spawned, go ahead and dev this to around 50% Renaissance. That should also put you at 25 development, give or take. Build a temple there because you already have a fort. Then you can pop this mission, get loads of production, get loads of tax, even some manpower and some local prosperity until the end of the game on this province, and more importantly, get 50% support for Renaissance. You're also going to make your advisors cheaper, which is just beautiful. And most crucially, you can then go ahead and once you've done that, make sure you're ahead in at least admin dip or mill, and you're going to have a temple there. This mission is going to upgrade your tax building, making it a cathedral, or in your case, a grand mosque, and spawn an university really, really early on. Unfortunately, and I have tested this scopes to Herat, not your capital, which is incredibly annoying, as there's actually a mission inside the Spanish mission tree, which requires a university and a promise to be built for a really nice buff that you can't get until you unlock universities. I was thinking of basically doing Timurids into a Spain build just to get that early mission, but it doesn't scope to your capital, which is really annoying. I'm very sad personally. I'm sure you are as well. You also unlock a estate privilege for the Ulema, which is Yele Intimanus is, I mean, it's an option, but I don't think exempting the Ulema from seizing land is kind of worth it. But it is what it is. And hey, you get a stab out of it as well, which is never bad. Persian capital is, if you really want to keep deving it, you can get even more buffs on it. But I'll be honest, you're probably going to be forming the Mughals before you get access to workshops barracks, as far as I'm concerned. Finally, Timurid Golden Age. Again, if you really want to go for it, you can, you can get it. But I suggest just go for Mughals before you have that option. Finally, reform the military is an option. Win your 15 battles, as I mentioned before. Get your army impressionism. This you should definitely pick up before you form the Mughals. If you can be bothered to get Chagatai Elite, the main issue there is basically getting 50 battles won. That's going to be quite hard to farm. You can pick up Appease the Elite's privilege for the Emirs, which is going to give you +1 yearly army professionalism at the cost of 10 Force Summit. I don't think that's worth it, especially because Force Summit is quite good for getting the Mill Hegemon, and you should absolutely be going for it as the Mughals. So I don't think this privilege is even worth taking if you do have access to it, but hey, it's 50 bill if you do somehow manage to get 50 battles to form the Mughal Empire. You shouldn't. The other one for Tajik regiments, again, if you have the time to get barracks out, then fair enough, you should probably take it. Otherwise, I don't think it's worth specifically going for just form the Mughals ahead of time. The interesting thing to note, though, is going to be the Persian Gulf missions, as this is going to give you, well, some sense of trade upgrades, but more importantly for monopolizing Hormuz, is going to give the merchant guilds this cool estate privilege for 5% trade efficiency and 35 flat trade power in the Hormuz trade node, for -10 trade power abroad. When you're playing the Mughals, you're going to be overextended to something stupid like 500%, so you're not going to have any trade power abroad anyway, so the debuff there is completely irrelevant. The issue is, so is this privilege. When you form the Mughals, you're going to lose the merchant guilds, so no real reason to... You're going to replace them with the Jains and other estates. So don't go out of your way to do this, because you can't give the privilege out to the merchant guilds because you're not going to have the merchant guilds. But that's the TLDR of the Mughal mission tree. If you want to see the actual Timurid path, then Laith's video from Social Streamer should be out, well, approximately at this time as well. So go watch that. However, we're here to then go ahead and use this basis to form the Mughals. Now, for your early wars, get your cause back against the Jam and start getting ready for, well, 1454 to annex your subjects. Now then, with that said, you want to start snaking. You want to go through QQ and start snaking into Ottomans. In the ideal case, although it doesn't always happen, the Mamluks will take the mission reward to gain cause on Syria so they can re-annex them. If that does happen, when you fight QQ, make sure to grab Raqba as you're able to release Syria over here. Not only is Syria just someone you don't have to core and spend early admin on, it also gives you less province war score cost on declaring reconquest wars instead of normal wars. You want to hit the coast of basically either get into Mamluk's coast or hit Ramazan, Dulkadir, Karaman coast ASAP. And the moment you do that, start dumping your sailors into boats into here. So start building galleys, start building maybe even some cogs, but mainly just make sure you have enough galleys. Start pumping all your sailors into this area over here. Why? Well, because as we're conquering here, and the further we get here, the better by 1454, we are going to need to go ahead and grab these two provinces. That's as well as the Malta forts. That's easier said than done without a navy. This is an island, so you can't exactly walk over there, especially when you're fighting someone like Aragon. And even if Naples takes these provinces back, by the time you get over there, they're going to have a navy, so even if you get mill access through all of the people over here and march all the way down here, they can just blockade you and prevent you getting onto this, well, island. As that's happening, you should follow the coastline, follow the Mamluks, and try and get into Fezzan, Mazan, Morocco, Tlemcen, and these areas. You want to get to Granada before Castile can get into Granada, and your guarantee should help with that. And the moment you do, either diplo-vassalize them, or basically just truce break them, or whatever you need to do, get into Granada and get in there proper. This will give you access to Alhambra, which you don't have the money to build yet, but you'll have the money to build eventually for admin efficiency. But most importantly, you'll be able to use that as a staging ground for a quick war with Castile. It'll be a bit painful, but it should be probably one of your more painful wars, but still doable to grab Cordoba. Why? Well, let's take a look at the Unify Islam decision. We need these two provinces, as mentioned before. No worries there. Then we need to go ahead and conquer down to Sus here. Well, Sus technically, but ever since that certain video game came out, everyone calls it Sus, including me. And that's the other annoying one. Cordoba is the other big one. And, well, the Ottomans. So you're snaking down through Syria, through QQ, that's all fine. Make sure you also snake north. You want to grab Constantinople. Ideally, you actually grab it before Byzantium falls, although that's easier said than done. I have noticed a couple times in my runs on this patch, the Ottomans actually take their time killing Byzantium, which I found quite interesting. They definitely don't have it done by 1454, which is surprising, if anything. Which means if you can get into Byzantium early, you can just grab it, and you don't exactly need it to be 34 dev. If it's 20 dev, that's still fine. Otherwise, the rest of the things are pretty achievable, honestly. You have a couple Arabian provinces, which you should be going for anyway. The other ones down in the south here, and a couple in the Hormuz that aren't too far away, and that's kind of it. You will have to go a bit into India, but given that you'll be playing the Mughals, going down into Thatta isn't exactly that big of a deal. So yeah, no issues there. Grab those eventually. Because the order they should be doing this in is, in my testing, what I think is the best is try and get as far as you can into the Middle East by 1454. Then the moment 1454 rolls around, most optimally annex Transox and Afghanistan at a minimum, then start annexing the rest of your subjects, and then barrel into India. More specifically, you want to get into Upper Doab or then into either Dabur or Lahore and just snake that. The reason is that you're not really looking for anything too specific here. You just need to snake it just to meet the requirements to form the Mughals. Once you've met the requirements, which by the way just require these two being called and stated, form the Mughals and completely ignore India until you've met these requirements here to conquer all this land to unify Islam. See, the Mughals don't actually have a unique tier 1 reform. They get unique tier 2 reforms and other cool stuff after that. So when you unify Islam and get the Caliphate, you get the tier 1 or really strong Caliphate reform, coming in with missionaries, mission strength, 3 trons of true faith, and war score cost versus other religions. And this is where the fun begins. See, After you take admin ideas, and we'll discuss your idea choices in a bit, I suggest you take diplomatic, which is going to come with 20% province war score cost, which is going to stack very, very nicely with the Caliphate's -10 province war score cost. But you're going over here anyway, so make sure you grab Malta, which is going to give you another 15. You can probably see where this is going. We're already at 45% war score cost versus other religions. Kaaba also has 10 minus 10 war score cost versus religions. And I'm going to stack that already quite well to 55% province war score cost versus other religions. And it just keeps going better. As eventually you have to take Milhegemon, giving you another -10 province war score cost. And eventually as the Mughals, you'll also be able to estimate the Slavic culture group, which is going to give you another -15. Meaning that you'll be running 25% eventually extra on top of the diplomatic -20. From here, so it'd be 45, 55 from Kaaba, 70 from Malta forts, without any excessive tag switches or anything else required for quite a lot of province war score cost, which again manages to hit 80 once you take into account the unification of Islam. And that's ignoring the pretty busted feudal theocracy ability as well. But once you've united Islam, you can then finally turn back around and start going into India proper. So for that, let's actually form the Mughals and start taking a look through their mission tree. Right, as you can see, I've just formed the Mughals. The decision to unify Islam remains there, so far so good. Make sure you absolutely take new traditions and ambitions. See, this is where the second part of our fun and games begins, the core creation cost. We have 25% core creation cost, and what I would suggest you do, and this is why I was really worried about the admin early to deving provinces, is by the time you form the Mughals, you should have enough admin saved up to take the first 3 administrative ideas, giving you 50% core creation cost, with the 25% from that, and the 25% from here. Now, if you can be bothered, one thing I would genuinely suggest you do is grind out the Hindustan culture group. This is quite a bit of land to conquer right off the bat. It's not that bad at all, to be fair, but it's just something that's going to slightly slow you down. If you do that, it is another 10% core creation cost, which is beautiful, and that's going to be about your 60% just for existing. Now, you can knock that up to 65 with land acquisition, but that does mean that you're still 50% core creation cost away from the cap. There's no really easy way about getting it, unless you want to see the little trick I'll be showing you right at the end of the video, so stick around for that. But let's now talk about the Mughal mission trees, and basically the crown jewel of this DLC. Now, the Mughals already had missions, and they were quite a, well, while not a big mission tree, they're quite a strong mission tree for sure. Don't worry though, this DLC has built upon it, and honestly quite well. You still get your permanent claims on half the planet, or in this case India, as you go through these missions. And the nice thing to mention is you can also, if you want to commit to artillery early, pick up an extra artillery level available versus forts. Definitely go for it, but bear in mind artillery is expensive, and if you're doing the snaking and not actually India consolidation, you're going to be struggling with money a lot more than you would be in a conventional run. So just something to be more aware of. The rest of the missions follow a pretty standard setup. If you're following Timmy as well, you'll be able to pop the Abu Said's dream pretty easily by just, well, you'll probably be owning these provinces anyway. As Pacified Punjab, that tends to be the harder part for me, because you need to actually get their minimum autonomy down as well. And when you do that, this shouldn't be an issue to get Afghan frontier, and then you're probably going to own these provinces anyway, so enjoy until the Age of Discovery, which is going to be ending around 1510, an extra 5% CCR, and some monthly war exhaustion reduction. And lighting in the pile is also an option. I won't recommend going for it, to be honest, this early, but it's there, and this enables the Elite Gurkhas Merc Company. These guys are good. Unfortunately, they're quite small, but these guys are nice, and I would recommend having them. 15% ICA and -10 shock and fire damage received on infantry is just nice to have, and they also don't use your manpower, so just a nice thing to go for when you're being really aggressively expanding. For the rest of the missions, you probably know them quite well from the default Mughal tree before, if you played the Mughals, but they are spread out a bit more, so it's not like conquer the entirety of Bengal in one mission. So the rewards are also spread out as well, and paced quite a bit better in my opinion. You start picking up things like passive 5% 50 gov cap here, and 50 gov cap here, until you finally somewhat kind of unite them, as this mission tree basically unites into the Fall of Coromandel and these missions over here near the bottom. The main Mughal conquest missions that you all know and love are going to be found here. The one change though is of course the Fall of Coromandel mission. That used to give you 10 admin efficiency until the end of the game. Now they've nerfed it down to 5. Now unfortunately one of the things that has been nerfed is the 10 admin efficiency you used to get from the Viceroyalty of Deccan. Now that only gives 5, but honestly given the amount of, well, sources of admin efficiency you can get in the game now, including but not limited to a gov reform for 2.5%, that's not the end of the world. Especially when you also take into account that Warehouse of the East is going to give you 5% max effective absolutism, which comes to 1.5% admin efficiency, meaning that it's a very specific 3.5% admin efficiency nerf compared to the old Mughal tree. However, everything else under the sun has been buffed, especially things like this mission here, which basically allows you to proclaim yourself to be, well, divine origin, which means that you can never get the Sinner trait on your ruler, which is a cool flavor, but also increase your max abs by 10 and gain +1 yearly absolutism at the cost of 10 ulema, loyalty, equilibrium, and 10% religious unity. Which brings us to the next point. Religious unity. It's going to be a bit hard to maintain in your one faith. Well, not really at all. This mission here for syncretic architecture is going to enable the Sun Temple as well as some statues. This Sun Temple is going to give you 25% religious unity when you build it, as well as some prestige decay. And the statue is going to give you some tolerance of true faith, some dip rep, and some tolerance of heretics and heathens. More fancily, however, let's please notice how this temple here gives 25% religious unity. But one of the new monuments that was added in this patch is this incredibly balanced Mausoleum, which has no requirements. It just gives 50% religious unity. Because of course it does. The best part about it is, even if you're playing someone like China and just take this Mausoleum, even if you're not Sunni, you can just still build it and solve most of the religious problems in your society. In fact, if you're doing a world conquest, you'll probably end up picking up this province here, which is going to contain the Maori heads. Guess what? You're going to be accepting the Polynesian culture because you're the Mughals, you're going to accept everyone. And when you do, 25% religious unity. You're going to have 100% religious unity just for existing as the Mughals. And that's just from the monuments, no humanism or anything required. Furthermore, you do pick up index syncretism here for +1 tolerance for heathens and maximum tolerance for heathens +1, which means that when you do this mission, you'll actually modify it by max tolerance for heathens +1 and an extra 10% religious unity, entirely overcoming the whole minus 10% you're getting from this, meaning that even if you convert literally no provinces and just grab those monuments, you're going to have 100% religious unity. Incredibly balanced. But there we go. Other highlights of this absolutely beautiful mission tree that I think are worth mentioning are things like the Gunpowder Empire, giving 15% land fire damage and 10% artillery combat ability until the end of your Reformation. Unfortunately a bit late, but it is what it is. And one thing that I thought was quite cool is going to be the mobile warfare option, where you can, well, change around your government. You can either pick up 15% movement speed until the end of the game, as well as getting yourself a nice general temporarily, or say screw it and double down on the cavalry. This is where the aforementioned Timurid cavalry meme comes in, because you can get 0.15 cavalry shock until the end of the game from this. It also, you know, sets you up for the elephant model, which depends how much you're a fan of that. Personally, I think that can be quite cool, and it does mean that if you're doing funky builds like QQ, which have cavalry shock in them until the end of the game, and you go and do this as Poland and then form Mughals and so on, you can make your cavalry even more insane with all of these setups. But here's even more buffs to the Rajputs from 10 ICA from this mission here, and almost like the Jadari-esque proclamation of yourself as the divine being that can do no wrong. I've just realized this Mughal, it's almost like the Jadari are inspired by the Mughal Empire because, there's so many similarities, in this case when we're going for a one faith as well, because not only do we have this proclamation of divine right, mean we're impossible to be sinners, we also have an entire section of our mission tree where we move our capital around. So we can move it here, we can move it here. That's honestly a very weird approach to it. It's almost like the Jadari are inspired by the Mughals in real life. Finally, one thing that I'm going to say that I think is quite cool is that if you've stacked up enough province war score costs where you're starting to hit the cap, especially from the things I mentioned here, this mission here is going to give you an estate privilege, which is going to let you trade in 5% province war score cost, so +5 if you've overstacked your modifiers, into -15% state's governing cost. That -15 state governing cost is actually really strong. Why? Well, it's because of the combination of two buildings. See, if we build town halls, we're going to decrease the province governing cost by 50% on every single province, if we build it everywhere. We can then combine it with state houses. See, they decrease the statewide governing cost by 20%. But if we build them on paper, glass, or gems, and we're going to find a lot of these paper, glass, or gems, we can knock that up to 40%. What that means is a combination of state house plus town hall on top of this means we don't quite get negative gov cap for having to govern a province. It doesn't go into negatives, but we can pay 0 governing capacity cost for a province that has an optimal state house built. Even without the optimal state house built, and because that's not doable literally everywhere, we can knock down the governing cost with that setup of all of our provinces down by 85%. Meaning that it's actually quite doable to go for a full state world conquest, especially with your core creation cost reductions, that you're going to be stacking to 65% quite passively. However, if you're going for a more trade company build, then make sure you do actually pop this mission from Malak and Viceroyalty. It's locked off because you need to complete either this mission or this mission. Either of these two missions will unlock it. That's the way that one works. And that estate privilege is going to decrease the governing cost of your trade companies, as well as making the investment in them a bit cheaper. I would suggest, though, that if you're going for it, go for a full one state run. Anyway, I am partnered with Paradox on this video, as mentioned before, so I'm not sure how much I should be going down this route, since this is probably a bit more unintended. But there is one thing that I just have to mention, because it just complements the Mughals so well. See, when the Mughals were being made, Paradox really went out of their way to prevent them being too strong. This can definitely be observed if you take a look at some of the great projects. For example, with this temple here, it literally has a specific requirement that you're not the Mughals or whatever the Mughals. Meaning that even if you're the Mughals and you revoke the HRE to become the Holy Roman Empire, or even form the Roman Empire, because you were at some point the Mughals, you can't get this temple. Which is really sad. They really don't want you to get that extra 15% core creation cost easily, even if this involves flipping religions. Unless, of course, you were to start as Muscovy, because Muscovy, on top of having a really powerful mission tree all the way around, well, make sure you don't form Russia if you're doing this yourself, has this mission here for Rally the Army. Very, very difficult thing to do. Focus admin, which you already have at the start. Then, well, I'm going to have to take burger loans, because I'll just take normal loans. Hire a +2 advisor. You can then, well, complement that by grabbing a merc stack or anything else to get to 80% force limit. I'm going to achieve that by very quickly annexing a person with troops. See, this mission here has two options. Keep all our permanent claims from the Muscovite missions unchanged, or turn all our permanent claims into non-permanent claims and gain minus 15% core creation cost, as well as a diplomat until the end of the game. We keep this if we form the Mughals, meaning if you actually do a Muscovy into Mughal build, you can enjoy max core creation cost, and then when you unite Islam, a max province force cost reduction, and just have the ultimate power trip of your life. You even get an extra diplomat so you can declare wars faster, and hey, you can claim entire states as well as the Mughals. That's cool. I shouldn't get too bad, because I don't think Paradox watches my videos, but I know they're going to watch this one since this one's partnered, so maybe set a condition on this one to make it trigger if you're Muscovite or, well, Russia, and if you're not, make this modifier go away. But to be honest, there's other ways, and honestly, there are a lot more things that are more broken than this anyway. If you can be bothered to do a Muscovy into Mughals build, enjoy it. If not, just know the option's there. But yeah, anyway, had to sneak in the modifier stack in there at the end. Regardless, in the comment section, and the top comment should be pinged, there'll be a link to my little special code. Make sure you grab that to grab your Winds of Change DLC. But that is unfortunately all I have time for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.